Hello and welcome back to a critique of Outlast. Let's get right back on with it. Did you know that this game repeats its basic tutorial?
Lol. Get fuck. Why? He continue talking to me despite having the door shut on him?
I don't hate this, considering some people are deciding to actually play Whistleblower first and you can turn off tutorials, so yeah, it's fine. Just strange to see for me, I guess. But Whistleblower had two pieces of guidance I actually thought were pretty neat. Firstly, you may end up getting stuck in this room since what you need to do is climb up the middle of the structure. And if you miss it, well, maybe you'll get given a clue from the game. But also that there is one door you need to reach in this sequence with Frank that gets you a vent that gets you out of the whole thing. And before you enter this set piece, you can see a series of lights that aren't lit except one. And it's the room that you need to get to. I don't know why that light is lit, but it is, and that's interesting. Anyway, let's get to actual mechanics. There seems to be this weird amount of non-choices in Whistleblower, times where you expect to be given a little more control, but you simply don't. You open with sending the email to Miles, but they make you do the sending, which to me is just a little bit weird. Why not have it so that you could see him press the button in the cutscene, or fuck it, have something you can choose not to do and then a slightly different set of events happen? Like maybe a friend does it for you, someone else who's trying to expose Murkoff. Nah, that's asking too much, just an arbitrary interaction, that's all. This would be a pretty good opportunity to make a neat choice. Give us two switches, one that kills this man by flooding the chamber, and one that releases the door. And once you've listened to what he has to say, you can make a legitimate decision. Hell, have it be that saving him will adversely affect the gameplay, giving a theme of conscience, and how it can cost you to have one in this environment. But I have to stop myself because I keep describing a better game. So how about an addition in gameplay of any kind? Well, when the cannibal locks you in the furnace, we get a nice selection of QTEs, being that you hit left click, and then left click, and then left click. Fantastic addition, but hey, at least when you do nothing, you actually lose this time. That's an evolution. Now, in terms of repeating the wonderful gameplay we've already seen, we get long segments of what we already well know at this point. Looking for the way out while slowing the enemy down with closing doors. You just gotta find the right room, then you need to get there before you succumb to the enemy. And then you do the exact same thing again, but you gotta find a different thing. I mean, this whole game, you crawl under, vault over, jump up to, and shimmy through or past obstacles. Until you activate the enemy, then go to where they came from and you can get through to the next area. Rinse and repeat. I guess I was expecting something new, but perhaps the mechanics are not where the new content lies. The focus was clearly the character and the story, right? But why? Perhaps the most iterative part of the gameplay in the entire world would be the moment you realize the game requires you to go to A, then B, then A, then B, then A, while avoiding the enemy in the last two sections to move through to the next area. This is the most bottom-of-the-barrel set piece in the whole game. Not to mention how the music just turns on and this guy slowly moves towards me, seemingly unaware that things are occurring around him. He hits me once and says nothing. I move past and close the door, and then they proclaim that I have escaped.
Okay.
Just a piss-poor sequence to remind people they are playing a video game. Ultimately, you can easily split the DLC into the intro, the cannibal, Gluskin, and the conclusion, with some stuff in between that's bloody pointless. All of the sequences where stuff actually happens run the same. It's all slowly escaping an enemy while trying to find your destination. And that will more than often, like I said, be the place the enemy originated from. It was extremely repetitive by the end of the main game, and they don't develop it whatsoever for Whistleblower. In fact, I think the worst sequence of Whistleblower also happens to be the worst sequence in the game altogether. It is mind-blowing to me that we have a sequence like this one, right at the beginning of Outlast, and then this many hours of development and gameplay later in the DLC we get this extremely simple sequence. But let's keep it going. There isn't a huge amount of new stuff in terms of movement. You have some janky response to try and climb up certain parts of the levels. Similarly, the shimmy will not always connect, causing some issues in terms of getting around, but the game almost nailed something rather interesting in terms of movement. Once you've been injured in the game, you will limp, and you almost have the same limp throughout the rest of the game, and they try and make the game work around it being something you have to deal with. They get so close, but then they fuck it up right before you reach the end. You gain full walking abilities back from when you've been limping, which annoys me as you guys are aware, just because humans really just don't regenerate like fucking Time Lords. We will have a sprained or broken ankle for a lot longer than 5 minutes. But it's okay because we're at the end, there is no gameplay. But then this guy does the chest stab, and now we're limping worse than ever. Of all the things to make me limp, I wouldn't have thought it would be a chest stab. They gave us a limp for ages after we had sprained or broken the ankle originally. but then we regained the ability to walk. But then, because we were stabbed in the chest, we limp again. They tore it away for no reason, then they gave it back for no reason. I cynically assume that this was because they tried to make you feel as though you'd really made it, you'd 100% escaped, and then you have this moment where you think for a second, oh my goodness, we've not made it whatsoever, but then you still do, just in time, just with enough power left in you. And I feel like it could have been a hell of a lot smoother, but honestly it's more of a nitpick, so let's move swiftly on. We still have batteries showing up in random places, but I did like the addition of the fog in one of the main connecting sequences. It made us blind regardless of night vision. I think they maybe should have worked with this far more in the game because it was something very smart, yet new and simple for them. I think it would have been very interesting. But seriously, they are still dropping batteries next to corpses to explain why they'd be here, and I find it amusing. Did anyone else experience a little trouble picking up batteries sometimes? Like, not specific to Whistleblower, it's literally in the whole game. Like, they were a little bit resistant when spamming left click. It just didn't seem to work properly sometimes. And making a decent return is the motion of refilling your battery, as it can be quite tension-filled because you don't know what's in front of you. Especially in the darkness, which very well may be the most often times you'll be reloading it, so it makes for genuine moments of spookiness. And this is supported by the strong need for night vision while you play, but there are once again opportunities to use the exploits I mentioned previously, and I call them exploits despite being extremely easy to discover and use. Also, I found this a little strange. Upon getting your camera back, they take your batteries all the way down to 0. I'm guessing it's because we're essentially at the end of the game at this point, but still, weird. I do love the defense though, that Eddie didn't give you back your batteries or he didn't leave them next to the camera, yet he left the camera there. Anyway, moving on to graphics. Whistleblower brings us back to the wonderfully suitable graphics of Outlast once again, all the way from sexy bloodstains to some really neat shadows. There's even a neat setup to the cannibal dude in that you can hear something's up and then see flesh everywhere, but you can't quite get a view of it thanks to the splatters of blood. It's a good use of bloodstains. We still have the decent character models just being repeated though, and to be a little bit more in depth with these models, they have the exact same issues for detail. Now I touched on this previously, but I thought I would save a bit of it for here. On closer inspection, we have no nails. Simplistically textured hands, but strong detail in the scratching and scarring with an eyelid being healed over in this particular variant. The reason they are scarier in night vision rather than normal vision is because we have a sort of standard when it comes to human-looking models, but in night vision we can't really say what things should look like. And the lack of standard detail can make the mind wander as to what kind of creature it is, and we don't know. The face here makes you wonder why people have these scars and cuts. The DLC answers why there are so many people that don't have a dingly-dang, but everyone's scars, I assume, are a result of all the experimentation in the Wool Rider project. Putting people through horrors and then trying to use that as a gateway to bring out the power. So these graphics and pieces of attention to detail have value. Strong value. However, it's nothing new once you've experienced it. The problem I find is that you can call these models relatively good, but not so much when they are spammed. But there is more to this game in the graphical and animation department, and it was accentuated by the DLC, like this guy's hand just phasing through his clipboard. Or all this gloompy gloomsh just pouring out of this guy's head seems a little bit awkward. As far as I know, this is the only time you get a splatter on the camera and it just vaporizes. Such a strange little thing they added just for this bit, and don't get me started on how difficult it would be to clean if this actually happened. The thing is that this game's character models have this sort of plasticky look, like the whole glassy eye expression but with their whole body. These enemies just come across as highly scripted and action figure-y, which, I mean, it's pretty hard to remain immersed in it when you sort of look at them that way. The problem overall is that this is a result of it being too exposed. I imagine that people come to this conclusion eventually no matter what, it just takes time. Once you have enough exposure though, they fall apart. On another note, did anyone notice how Blair was ripped apart in the end, by the way? He literally doesn't bleed. He is a guy who got torn about the room and has literally left no blood. Gotta love that there's a guy right next to him with his intestines out and he's got a splatter that spreads all around him. Not a huge issue, just funny. Another tidbit is that the Australian guy who speaks to Waylon at the end is clearly the same model as one of the more common ones in the asylum. But he has an accent now, so you can't possibly tell he's the same character, right? Honestly though, Whistleblower looks just as good as the original game. Almost like it is the original game. Nothing too new or interesting really, but hey, moving on. Sound once again being the same as the main game, but more and more opportunities for seeing mistakes. I'll say that I really liked that they gave the cannibal dude his own theme in a way, that he was essentially alerting us to his presence with his saw. I guess the equivalent of this would be the chains that Chris tends to drag around and his heavy breathing. So like I said, as I moved on with this game, or at the very least its DLC, I found that the soundtrack was bloody falling apart. As you are chased regularly, the loud as fuck violin just gets so damn repetitive. And then to add to the confusion, the music will just turn off randomly.
What the? Why is the music turned off?
At some points it plays the super hyped "we're about to die" music, despite the fact that your pursuer will be moving extremely slowly and is many meters away from you. Oh, and this is just as much my fault, but I died because I couldn't tell what was even hitting me, and I was intrigued by the sounds. Not sure what to make of this little bit, but it is a steam-blowing thing that killed me. It's just weird. Ultimately though, this game has a serious problem trying to dictate the atmosphere with the soundtrack. This is a conclusion I reached in the previous sound section, but check this sequence out. This is extremely awkward. The enemy is still chasing, but the music is turned off, and it's made me realize something. Without the music, Outlast reminds me of the Big Bang Theory without the canned laughter. This game becomes hollow without it. You watch this shit and tell me something different. Anyway, onto atmosphere. What has been said previously stands, but there are some interesting concepts to consider. The fundamental that you head through the game backwards to the main game is pretty awesome, for a new sense of exploration. Being fully aware as Miles about what happened in the research center of the asylum gives you an intimate and terrifying perspective of what's in store for you as Waylon, especially when you are literally processed as an inmate. It is undeniably engaging to see the asylum fall apart from the inside and be around for such intense moments of power being completely flipped. I will undoubtedly say this was a wonderfully constructed scare right here. Note that I didn't say jump scare because it's kind of unfair to refer to this as a jump scare. There is a man hanging via noose from a distance. He looks like a smartly dressed enemy that might cause you harm. It is only once you get close that you realize he's actually dead. Like seriously, this is way more of a clever piece of design, and it's so simple. It's such a pity that we don't work with more organic scares in Outlast. It is undeniable that Eddie Gluskin is pretty damn scary. Like if there was any way to objectively measure how something is atmospherically effective, then I would have to say that Eddie Gluskin gets to be on the higher tiers. There's never any denying it, the atmosphere can still work wonderfully well in this game, and there are several moments that it shows off its potential.
A gift for the groom.
This sequence in the DLC is pretty damn unnerving, with the different voices feeling as though they are getting closer and closer. But the DLC still threw me off in many ways. You close the door here and the guy shows up even though he makes no sound, so he just teleports. This is Chris all over again. As I've shown you before, we have the water monster bait.
Ah! No! Water monsters has amnesia!
And another example of expecting to be chased or at least attacked by this guy, but he just doesn't. He stands away and moves on. I feel like you guys know what I have to say on the atmosphere in Outlast as a totality. You know how much I respond to it and how much I appreciate the idea of subjectivity. So I won't take away from whatever experience you may have had personally. But despite it essentially being dead to me well before I was even able to play Whistleblower, I can easily see where there would be peaks and valleys for the experience. It is still definitely something to appreciate about Outlast. So how about the AI once again? Chris Bloody Walker, the AI who never quits, is just as retarded as the main game once again. This whole chase sequence was fucking terrible, and it looks funny as hell from the fact that this is the first time I ever played it. I ran forward and ended up walking into a wheelchair. But Chris isn't coded to go very far at all, so it didn't even matter. The music is suggesting that I should be scared, but the enemy literally can't get me. And the hilarious idea is that I'm actually barely moving and reloading the battery in darkness. This is the maximum amount of helpless I can actually feel, and I am 100% safe. I guess it wouldn't be so bad if I didn't know that. But it's pretty hard not to figure it out when Chris is right there. Chris is bad at chasing. He just walks off because he doesn't have any semblance of an autonomous entity. He just wants to chase you and does so until you cross the proverbial finish line, which is clearly those little shimmy walls. And does that mean they only included them to make it so that Chris could no longer follow you? Like the AI is relentless? Well, beds stop him. When you crossed loading screens in Amnesia, they acted as safe havens, but not in the most typical sense. They got you away from the enemies, but if you left something you needed back there, you knew going back would cost you, and you'd have to overcome that fear. While with Outlast, they never require that you return into basically any segment. So Chris, again, complete with his shitty AI simply getting stuck on this bed, isn't exactly scary because you don't even need to go near him. The theory is that he literally is supposed to glare at you from here, but to me it was just confusing because I figured he was stuck. We know full well that he could get over that thing, so I started to try and release him by reapproaching him and making him come to different parts of the bed. But no, he was just permanently stuck. Once again, sort of just ruining my experience. I don't know how you can resist playing with his AI at certain points because he's so easy to manipulate. But moving on to the Randys of the world, the roaming encounters start to feel really off. I don't know how to explain it any better than saying, the enemies just don't seem bothered either way by my existence. They come and go and sometimes hit me, but they don't even seem happy or satisfied about doing it. They are so bloody dead in the face and stiff, as I tried to allude to earlier. Randys have difficulty being threatening sometimes because they deal such little damage, but frustratively, they compensate for this by giving them the ability to pull you from hiding spots with telekinesis. If I slow this down, look how my body is pulled forward to him despite my constant walking backwards, and he can then grab me once it's pulled me far enough. Normally, he wouldn't have had a chance of getting me, but by forcing me to phase forward and allowing the bot to connect its arms with my body, he could get me. Imagine what that did for my atmosphere. Besides that, a funny is that the enemy simply can't deal with you rising above ground, which is hilarious in conjunction with every other thing that's happening with the AI in these games. Literally, the AI flee from the scene the second you get above ground, because otherwise they would break and simply stare at you. This wouldn't be a problem if there wasn't so many bloody places this could happen. Now, all I have to say about Gluskin is that he's ridiculously slow to match the narrative requirements for your leg, and it's weird. And of course the force field for the bumper car action returns, and unfortunately the cannibal has a similar sized bumper car ratio to Chris Walker. It's just bloody annoying. But of course, guess who returns for this DLC? The one, the only, the best AI in history, the twins. The twins are rolled out for their cameo, and it's worse than the main game. They say the exact 3 lines they've said previously. God knows they won't be paying for an extra voice actor to do more lines.
He looks nervous. He looks nervous.
I would like to kill him. I would like to kill him.
As would I. As would I.
Regardless of that lack of effort, the twins' AI once again is being shown for the useless shit that it is. We have the music for the twins chase on, and they sort of look at you, but mainly just treat it as though you aren't even there. If the twins are activated within proximity, they will either go for a grab or a swing, which is avoidable, as tested. And when you pull it off in this area, the twins even break from their pinning to the ground temporarily, only to stop. Moving forward from that, you can manipulate the enemies to eventually just be herded into a circle. What about this is scary anymore? These things don't behave in a way that would make you believe they are people. It's just broken or piss poor AI meant to scare you away and for you to run. This AI obviously wasn't meant for this, but AI in games like this should have protocols for this situation. And that is why they fail miserably in absolutely any scenario where you don't immediately run from them. This is a collection of 3 psychopathic murderers, 2 of which can kill me instantly if I stray too close or if they catch me off guard. And I'm able to run them around in circles and stare at them as they hilariously try and catch up to me. What the fuck is this shit? What is this? Ultimately, the AI is so simple and easy to get by that the developers just simply drop them in places where you can't just get by them. I've used the term kill wall before because it basically means that they represent a line in the sand that you can't cross. Could you imagine them doing a sequence where you only think there is someone nearby, that you never actually see them, you only hear them? But Outlast doesn't do that. Outlast can't stand the idea of you going through a whole area without being scared, without having something in your face. To me, this shows a blatant lack of understanding on how to design a lengthy horror game, and proves just how simple it is to make what people consider to be the greatest of horror. In order to get past enemies, I end up having them follow me into a room and closing the door, then escaping out in order to give myself the opportunity of getting to where they came from every time. You can literally escape the enemy by slipping under the bed and out again. How in the world can't they catch you while doing this, and yet they grab me with their minds in other scenarios, is completely ridiculous. The AI after playing this game and its DLC thoroughly is the biggest issue to me, and I will give a more finalizing perspective on this when we reach the conclusion. Though for now, how about we take another look into scripting? You can close the door on the 3 clones at the beginning, but it doesn't matter because they silently get in regardless, like the guy later in the game. Just imagine if other things could happen. The first running away section of the game is one that is not only highly scripted, but one that is literally involved with a door that shuts itself as soon as you pass it. I'm not sure what they're trying to evoke with this tiny sequence, but it's shit. You don't even get time to realize you're in real danger. But it continues. Despite having so many doors potentially leading all over the structure, we are left with one exit. Despite having a whole series of courtyards and open areas, there's only one exit. Though if you ignore the game's request to actually press buttons in this scenario, you actually get killed, which is nice compared to the chair in the Traeger scene. While you're on the elevator, you will die if you don't get off, though the animation for death is not really there, and I think it's because they didn't expect anyone to sit here and die. Additionally though, if you don't wiggle during this cutscene, then you will die. This is a welcome change from the nothing they normally do. However, this is Outlast, so bring on the jump scares.
On the floor! Down!
Fuck off. These jump scares are fantastic. They will even happen when you crouch and approach extremely slowly. It doesn't matter how stupid they get, they will always be very scary. This is what I think works as an example of a game telling you to be scared. Back when Joseph Anderson accused Soma of doing that, he was straight wrong. My assessment will make a whole lot more sense than his, and I'll get to it soon enough. It got so bad though that I legitimately started to miss the jump scares because I couldn't tell where the fuck they even were anymore.
Can't believe we're still in the sciencey area. Where be the asylum? Oh. Still. What? What? Hello? Did anyone see that? What was the jump scare? Oh, are we making progress? Please tell me this is something. Oh, hey. Sorry, I missed the jump scare.
There would be really loud sounds and sometimes a flashy light and a scream, but I wouldn't know what the hell I was missing. Let's not forget the splendor of teleporting enemies to me as well. Wonderful stuff. This goddamn game is so bloody scripted. There isn't really much freedom whatsoever. And I guess, in a way, that's what the plan was from the beginning, to craft a very specific experience. But to me, it represents a huge downfall for the game. But anyway, that's the end of this part, and there's going to be one part left. I hope you're all looking forward to it. I certainly am. We're going to finish up the DLC and then hit that conclusion hard. Thanks for watching, folks, and I'll see you next time.